As an artist, we must know the basic fundamentals first. I feel you, it's kind of boring, but this is your very first step to develop your drawing skills. So let's start with gestures, or we call as dynamic poses. When I was younger, I didn't know about this, but thanks to the internet, it helped me to find the right step to practice my drawing skills. Have you heard about gestures or dynamic poses? Well, this fundamental will help you to bring your ideas into awesome poses if you got a knowledge about it. Some artists are having a hard time to draw awesome poses, perhaps they are lacking in foundation like line of action. So, what is line of action? Line of action is the very first step when creating a character. We have three main kinds of line of action, which are C, S, and I. These line of actions will help you to have a good poses and keeps the viewers to grab their attention to see your art piece. Viewers will also easily understand what is the main idea of illustration. Knowing this CSI will help you to avoid stiffness of your illustration. So from now on, you must remember this first step when creating a character or an illustration. Let me show you some examples of CSI. The first example is, could you guess what kind of line of action is this? The answer is C. Why? For you to know the correct line of action, you must pay attention to the form of the body. Look at the spinal cord of the drawing and try to observe with your eyes, and you will eventually realize the line of action. If you don't get it, here is the second example. How about this one? C, S, or I? The answer is I. Why? Since we see a stand or a still pose, then it is I. Usually, this pose is used in turnaround character design or concept art to visualize the character for a story. So, the good example for this is Peter Morsch Barcher. Look how he used the eye in his illustration. It doesn't look like boring, but look how he used the other props to make it look interesting and appealing. These curves makes the illustration more beautiful and dramatic because of the line of the action. Here is the last example. Could you guess the line of action? The answer is S. Why? To find the right line of action, see the head and follow the body flow until you reach the feet, knowing that the little tilt of the head will give emphasis to the line of action. Since we already know about the main line of action, now we are going to know about the diagonal, curves, straights, and horizontal lines, which are also considered as the other line of action. You are not supposed to animate drawings, you're supposed to animate feelings, Ollie Johnston said. As I told you, it all begins in the gestures. You can do it in so many ways like up, down, left, right, forward, backward, and diagonal. When we use vertical, it is I, right? This means the character feels stable and solid. If we use horizontal, we see a character or an object that are laid down, relaxed, well rested, and sleep. Curves, sometimes it gives us sadness, exhausted feeling, or a heavy feeling in a character. While diagonal, we feel the intense action or a feeling of movement. We can use diagonal movement when a character is afraid, angry, or doing sports like boxing. We can use simple lines to know our wants in a character by doing some simple brush strokes without making any detailed drawing yet. This will help us to save more time when creating a drawing. These are too many ways to use the gestures to your drawing, to show your viewers how your character feels. By practicing, find some gesture references on Pinterest. Trace it at first and try to redraw it without looking at the reference. Always consider the feeling of your character to help your audience see what type of the character you are trying to show to them without the use of words. Because gesture is a visual form of communication. You need observation to do gestures for your illustrations. If the character is heavy, you use the diagonal line since he carries so much weight. On the other hand, the skinny one does not need any support itself. Alternating twist of head, rib cage, and pelvis gives more life to your character, rather than using a less dynamic in your drawing. Observation is the key for you to know the gestures or dynamic poses. With this diagonal line, you see an action going on. When you see the vertical line, you see the strength and solidity. And when you see a horizontal line, you see rest and calm. This is an important part of each drawings. Without this, you won't get any good poses that you like. So try to practice it now. We're going to talk about pushing the gestures. If you are a cartoonist or an illustrator making your own characters, your necessary ingredient is to push the idea. Why? It's because it gives more feeling to the character and unique personality. This will help you to connect, and when they are connected, your audience will never forget them. Let me show you some examples, like Tom and Jerry, Cat and Dog, Kim Possible, Samurai Jack, Johnny Bravo, or Pink Panther. I bet you still remember their vibes in the animation series. You don't even need to watch it again, it is because you are connected to those characters already. This is why we need to push the gestures. It gives us more life to our characters. And now, the question is, how to push the idea? I've got a reference to show you a perfect example for this session. First, you need to observe the reference, knowing if we can push the subject by looking at the line of action or the gesture. Second, create a new layer and draw what you see. Third, redraw the subject and push the idea. It can be pushed in the shoulders, legs, head, arms, or its body shape. And fourth, redraw with more exaggerated feeling. This is a good start for you to practice the gestures by doing these steps. You will understand pushing the ideas more with exaggerated theories. We will talk about more this later in creating a character. Now let's talk about silhouette. So what is silhouette? Silhouette is about readability. Having strong silhouettes will make your drawing more effective and clear. Asking yourself, what is the main idea of the pose and what is the best idea to represent it as a silhouette? It gives clarity to your drawing. As they said, good design should be clear and informative. Let me show you the bad and good silhouettes. First, let me give you a few seconds to observe the most effective silhouette. So what is the most effective? By looking at the samples, the most effective one is the right side. On the other hand, left is not clear, less effective, and hard to understand the subject. Here is another example. You know exactly who they are because of the clarity of their shapes and clear representation of their silhouettes. We can see Mickey Mouse, Johnny Bravo, Mr. Bean, and other popular cartoon characters. So since we already know about the silhouettes, let's talk about negative spaces in the silhouettes. Negative spaces are relative to the silhouette, since it is the one that makes everything clear and more efficient to your drawing. You can even make your negative space as a unique style of yours by pushing your main silhouette into different approach. Like, for example, we have this normal silhouette, but when you got your own style, you can play with negative spaces by doing some big to little spaces. Negative spaces also makes your drawings more breathable. If there is no negative spaces, then your illustration is not clear and you will feel there's something wrong in the drawing. We can also relate this into graphic design since we need enough space to the text placements. In photography, we need clear silhouettes too. Your audience will get confused when the silhouette is not clear. Do not ignore the silhouettes in your drawing. This is something that you need to use whenever you create a character or any subjects that you want to draw. It is also part of the art fundamentals, so mind the silhouettes with negative spaces. Let's proceed with the space. So what is space? Space will give your drawings depth, making your drawings feel like they are physically grounded and looks like more believable. This is when you need to mind when creating a character or any subjects. You need to have sense of space or believable ground to pull your viewers into your drawing. Imagining that there is a real gravity into your illustrations. So let me give you some examples. I know that you are familiar with Egypt's illustrations, and this is a good example to see that there is no much having depth in space and you can see the flat perspective. We have another examples, like you can differentiate these two. We have a ball that is not so grounded and we have another ball that has solid contact to the ground. You can feel the weight when you create the sense of space, and that is why it looks more realistic and believable. When we use the horizontal line as our line of action, we can feel that there is space going on by putting a subject in a horizontal line. If we keep the things in flat on the bottom, we can achieve an illusion of weight. When creating an illustration, we need to mind that we don't only draw in a flat surface, but we need to think about having three-dimensional feeling like 3D modeling. If you know Kim Jung-gi, he is well known as a professional artist who can draw in any perspective without looking any references, practicing his observation skills by drawing different angles but same subject. By developing your space into your drawings, find some references on Pinterest and try to imagine what kind of space it is. Alright, now we already know about gestures, silhouette, and space. We are going to proceed in a deeper level of fundamentals.
What is composition? Literally, composition is something you will see in music, but in arts, it is something you need to be aware in placing objects in a picture. There is a good and a bad in a composition. Let's see the bad composition first. With the samples, you will see it's a normal picture, but what is missing? So let's find out how to make a good composition. For you to understand it better, composition is about giving a pleasing way to see the right objects in place. So we have the rule of thirds. Basically, is when you divide the pictures and divide in 9 equal parts. It is also used in photography, if you're fond of taking photos. Don't put the objects near the edge when creating a drawing. This is going to bother people viewing it. It is because the drawing is cut off. If it is the main object, then it should be in the center or maybe away from the edge. You need to mind where to place the main object, so people would actually see what's the main focus. Here is other bad sample that you can improve. Like for example, if you observe the drawing, there is something missing. So what are you going to do with it? If you do not know, then apply rule of thirds. Then see the empty squares and try to add something on it to balance the drawing. Perhaps you could put a tree or maybe an object just to make it pleasing and make it whole. But composition can be broken sometimes. It depends on the illustration too. You can use Fibonacci in your artwork. You can search on Google and multiply it and fit it on your canvas. Well, this golden rule do not need to all your composition, but it would be so cool if you could also add something like this in your drawings. But yeah, so it is also important to know to make your illustrations to get better. So from now on, always mind your composition in every drawing that you make.
Now, we're going to talk about exaggeration. So what is exaggeration? We use exaggeration to the drawings to communicate ideas, pushing or pulling the subject to its limit. It captures the feeling of what you see in the pose rather than the physicality. If you already understand the human anatomy, you will also definitely understand what you can push from the subject. But if not, no pressure. I will show you some examples to see the exaggeration. First, let's have an observation. Take a few seconds and see the differences. Notice that these two are different volumes. Rhythm, more exaggerated and does not look like generic at all. So this is what exaggeration makes your drawing stand out to the other drawings. So the question is, how do we exaggerate the poses? Well, it depends on the subject you are creating. If it is a human, you can exaggerate them from the head, spinal cord, legs, shoulders, hands, face, or even their weight. I got some few examples for you to see and compare the reference to the exaggerated drawing. You can see how I stretch the legs more, pushing the shoulders to express more feelings to the character. If it is an old man, you can pull out his head forward or more curved from the back. It is also the same to the exaggerated expressions. You can pull in or pull out on the face depending on their emotions. We can push the eyebrows, lips, nose, imagining that the face is elastic. Of course, we need to mind if the face anatomy is still correct. While on the other hand, we can also push the objects like cars, vases, or any other objects. Notice how cars has different shapes, and we can play over the exaggeration based on their shapes. First, we need to observe which one that makes the object more recognizable, then we can use that as our main idea and push it. Mostly, this is required for animation production. Art directors will ask you to push the shapes. To practice the exaggeration, find some references on Pinterest and try to push the body parts I stated earlier. This is the most essential for caricaturists and cartoonists. We are now in the story. So what is story? Story is the most important of all illustrations. If there is no context, there is no meaning. Making a story will engage your audience and think about what's happening in your illustration. For example, we give our gesture with context. Think about how can we support the pose? Asking yourself, what is she doing? Why is she doing this pose? Perhaps he is in the fight with a guy, dodging an aggressive dog, or asking a lady's hand to dance with a gentleman. Anything that makes the gestures more fun. Having a story in your drawings will make your audience longing, and they might even wait for your next illustrations. Before I show you the good examples, here are the bad examples of telling a story. Your audience will get confused when your illustration isn't focusing on the main idea. Or there's a poor communication going on in your illustration. Here are some good examples that tells a story. This one looks like they are in a medieval era, hunting animals or guarding their village. They are relaxing while waiting for the food. And a woman is playing her instrument while those two are listening. A corgi exercising with tiny hamsters with a radio on. Having moments with Hodder's pet while the tree is in tear of joy. Something like that. Did you recognize how these awesome artists draw illustrations with context? So this is a story. I want you to do something like this in the future drawings, asking yourself, but it really depends on the illustration and to do the story you are showing. Other viewers can understand it, and others are not so. It really depends too, as long as you keep asking yourself these questions. Number 1, what is the main idea of this pose? Number 2, how can I incorporate the idea in a story? If you love to tell stories with illustrations, you can make your own storybook and share it to the world. Let's have a mini exercise. Before we proceed to the next topic, I encourage you to do this. You don't need to do a lot of details, but concentrate on the idea of the story. All you have to do is to create a rough sketch to complete the context of this reference. Once done, after this live session, you can send the images in the comments below and I will give you a feedback. So let's talk about seeing. What is drawing? Drawing is seeing. It is not about getting a paper and a pencil and starting to draw, but you start observing what you are seeing and draw it on a paper. When observing, you are asking questions to yourself what kind of shape it is. Is it a triangle, square, rectangle, circle, oval? Seeing is different from looking. Anyone can look at the subject, but it takes a deeper understanding in order to truly see. Seeing is about knowing, thinking, and asking questions. Here is the sample to see how we use our seeing or improving our observation skills. By practicing, you need to determine the original shapes first in the image that you found on the web. And then, simplify the shapes. And now you can create another layer and think about new shapes that suit to the subject you are creating. But of course, you should be aware if your drawing is in the right way. If it is a dog, then it should look like a dog. And if it is a hamster, then it should not look like a guinea pig. Make it clear as possible. You don't have to draw same as the original. I'm sharing you on how to create your own drawings using your own understanding and playing the shapes. Here are the shapes. We have square, oval, and triangle. Square represents masculine. Oval is feminine. And triangle is villain. Of course, we will draw while we are thinking because drawing is thinking. You should not be afraid of bad drawings. Instead, overcome your fear. It is normal for us to be upset when we feel our drawings are terrible. Sometimes you all need rest, refreshment, or redraw it again. Explore different shapes without stressing what shape should turn into. Use these random shapes rather than the generic one that we normally see in reality. Have originality in your work. If you know about caricature or exaggerating the subject, you will notice that they are related to each other since you are using your observation skills and developing your own style at the same time. But don't stress that much about finding your own style right now. Just have fun creating unique shapes. Our drawings evolves all the time, so your priority right now is to practice your seeing skills. We also have different composition to choose from when you want to create a believable perspective like bird's eye view, worm's eye view, and human eye view. You can pick any of these type of views. Challenge yourself and try out to do all these different views and let me know what is your favorite one. Well, my favorite one is human eye view. Finally, we are in values. This is the last art fundamental in this session that is fun to talk about. So what is values? Values is when we use lights and darks in our drawings. We give them power, create drama, and communicate form. We give more life and it also catches the audience attention. We can either use black and white or colorful tones. But for me, I prefer to use color tones rather than using black and white. So I'll be showing you my techniques on how I use values in my illustrations. First, when coloring your subject, remember to keep it loose and keep it clear. This way, it will help you to be productive and finish the drawing early. Don't focus on the details too much. Don't zoom in the artboard and do the details or do it pixel by pixel. That's wrong. You will take a lot of time to finish it. When doing the values, you must zoom out your artboard so you can see the whole details of your illustration. You need to get used to it. Professional artists also work on a tiny canvas to see all the details, like for example, Craig Smollin's art. Just look how he did on the details. Since we know about losing the details, now let's learn about the color theories. To be honest, I don't use this much, but I have some ways to do it in my own illustrations. But you can memorize this theory if you want to. You can move the hand of the color wheel to know what is the complementary of it. As long as your colors are still harmonious to each other, there is no problem with the illustration. Looking at these bad examples, the colors do not match to each other. To fix the colors, you can go back to the color theories to use as a guide. If you look at the brand color palettes, we can see the blue is complementary to orange, orange to green, or red and yellow. When planning for the color palette, you can do different variations of the colors to see the potential final color that suits in your illustration. So once you already know what palette you want to use for illustration, You can proceed on creating your final base color using your final choice of color. So how do we pick the dark tones and light tones of the base colors? First, use your eyedropper tool to get your base color. Then, click foreground color on the right side of your tools. You will see the circle spot where your base color is. To get the darkest tone of your base, make a diagonal line downwards. While in white tone of your base, make a diagonal line upwards. So, that is the rule of picking the right tones of the base colors. When picking the darkest color, you must avoid the edge of the darkest tone. Use this area rather than exceeding to the edge of the color. This will make your drawings avoid dull, muddy, and dirty. Use dark tone colors when it's only complementary in your drawing. I use dark brown color or dark gray tones as my alternative black color in my illustrations. Even in children's book illustrations, some illustrators use more vibrant rather using the very dark tones. Now, let's do the filter adjustments. Using this final stage to your illustration, it will enhance your drawing. We have curves and color range. First is curves. The top of the bar is the highlights. The middle of the bar is the midtone. The bottom of the bar is the shadow. Most of the time, I don't have any goals when I do these filter adjustments. I'm just exploring and trying to find which is the best adjustment that I feel better to my drawing. Explore the curves and see if it makes your illustration more better. Second is Gaussian blur. Using this kind of blur, literally, it blurs the target area in your illustration. If we have the main focus in our illustration, we definitely want to use the Gaussian blur to make the background unrecognizable, but it is still there, of course. But since you want your audience to catch their attention to the main idea, then you blur things out that is not necessarily need to see. Just like in photos, we use the focus to your face rather than focusing the lens to the background, right? To do it, make sure that your drawing is finished and final. Merge the layers and make a copy of your finished illustration to use it for you to blur the background. Now, go to the filters, blur, and then Gaussian blur. Find your soft brush. Use the 70 or 80% of pressure to reveal the main focus. Then, that's it. Third is noise. Noise is really helpful to enhance your drawing. Sometimes it is not enough to depend to your brushes that you chose in your illustration. Noise can help you to sharpen all the details. It will also give you crisp and refine your drawing. To do the noise, go to Filters, Noise, and Add Noise. You can also use Sharpen and try to explore each settings, but be careful, it will break the quality of your illustration. Fourth is Texture. Texture is good for your illustrations, but don't let the texture control over your art piece. Don't be dependent too much on it. I only use paper texture as the final touch of my rendering, and others are brush textures. So, how do we use the texture in your illustration? Using texture, you can find any textures on any website that is free to use. Drag into your painting app and make it as overlay layer, or you can use multiply layer. Use the opacity if you don't want too much texture on it. So let's talk about lighting. Since we are in the values, the value is not complete without the lighting. Lighting will give more intensity and illuminate your artwork. Lightings make the drawing come to life. Creating a lighting effect to your illustration, you must have a plan where the sun comes from. Is it at the top, right, left, or at the back of your main subject? If you cannot imagine where the sun or light is coming from, you can use the imaginary sun and position it where you are comfortable. If you are not used to create lightings in your illustrations, this is the right time to challenge yourself to practice. It is difficult to create lighting at first, but you will get used to it when you make it a habit. I use light resources on Pinterest. It is easier to know where the light bounces in the subject, so we don't have to guess where you want to put the bouncing light in your art. Once I'm already satisfied with my dark shadow values in my drawing, I will create a new layer using screen to lighten the edges of the subject. You can also use color dodge too. If you have an illustration with superpowers, color dodge is the best layer mode. Now let's talk about rim light and backlight. Rim light is a lighting technique where the image subject is backlit and the image is exposed to hide the subject features in the shadow. We also use the screen mode layer to create a rim light or a backlight into our subject. To have a better rim light, find some good reference that has rim lights. Then, try to observe and asking yourself where the rim light bounces. Is this the part also affected by the rim light? I had some bad lighting issues in my drawings before, especially shadows. But since I used my observation to practice and study the values, I got a better understanding and I can even make my own lighting without looking at a reference. But of course, it is just for me to test myself if I can do it with or without the image sources. So here are the do's and don'ts when creating a cartoon character, and it is also applicable to the real face too. When creating a head, do not create a face straight away. It will make your drawings anatomically wrong. Draw a circle and then draw cross lines as a guide for you to know where to place the eyebrows, eyes, nose, and lips, knowing that the circle has our skull shape. When creating a front view face, the earlobes should align in the bottom edge of the nose, and the upper lip should align in the middle of the nose. Do not put the ears below your jaw or next to the forehead. To know where the exact place to draw pupils, you need to base the both side edges of the lips. Misplacing the pupil will make your eyes unrealistic, so you need to mind the alignment. In a side view angle, draw a circle again, since it is a basic construction, and then draw a unique shape by exaggerating the jaw or perhaps exaggerating the hair. Then draw the nose and lips outside the edge of the circle. You need to remember when doing the side nose, lips, and chin, it should look like this. Create a diagonal line to see if they are anatomically correct. And here is you should not do when aligning the nose, mouth, and chin. So be mindful about using the diagonal line. Same as in the eye socket. Create a diagonal line inside the eyebrow as a guide to place the eyelid and the eye. Do not align the eye in the edge of the eyebrow. So how can we base the younger to older faces in cartoon? The face of a baby depends on their age, making the eye bigger, making the nose close to the eyes. Draw big ears and a tiny mouth and short neck. On the other hand, adults have long noses, long jaws, tiny eyes, medium eyes, big mouth, and long neck. Well, it will take a lot of time to bring your ideas into a drawing, so you should keep making headshots with different shapes or variations to be able to draw any heads in no time. This will help you to create unique faces when creating your own characters. Since we know about the techniques in creating a face, let's do the body shapes now. We have different body shapes: hourglass, pear, inverted triangle, column, and apple shape. But in cartoons, we need to think outside the box. You should not limit yourself with this type of body shapes only. So how do we make this type of shapes more unique and stand out to the other shapes? The technique is to use the small, medium, and large, exaggerating the body shapes. Like for example, playing with the small, medium, large shapes. Large to small to medium, or medium, large to small. Playing this process will help us to avoid generic body shapes. We don't see Pixar, Blue Sky, Sony Animation, or any animation studios have generic poses since they look so boring and saturated in the eyes of the public. Using this technique will help you develop your own style as well, but still, you must know the body anatomy first before doing this. You can download the PDF files of Human Anatomy by Andrew Loomis. Now, let's talk about the first stage of character design. Before we start with character design, you must have a short story background of your character. This is the character designer's priority, is to find out the background story. Once the short story is there, you can search for references that suits to the background of your character. For example, there is a cowboy named Austin Foster. He lives in Livingston, Louisiana. He is a handsome, pretty boy in town. He doesn't like real guns. He uses his water gun as an alternative. He is faithful, loves his country, his family, and he is an old-fashioned guy. He also have a squirrel named Marley. Villagers loves him so much because of his kindness and friendliness. So once you get the short background of the character, you can jot down the main description of it. His name is Austin Foster. He is a cowboy in the range of 25 to 28 years old. He is a handsome, pretty boy, ranging 5 to 5'11" feet, with water gun and a pet squirrel. An old-fashioned who believes in God, country, family, kind and friendly. After jotting down this description, you can start searching for the ideas and inspiration to draw the drafts. We will continue this in 1-hour demo. Now, let's talk about repetition. Repetition is closely related to harmony. It is a principle of design. This term refers to a way of combining elements of art so that the same elements are used over and over again. Repetition is a drawing makes your illustration feeling complete and detailed. I use repetition in drawings too. Repetition gives uniqueness to your character. Here is my sample of using repetition. As you can see, this repetition makes the subject whole and knowing that this character symbolizes it. It just gives you more satisfaction when you make repetition. You can see repetitive lines and elements in the drawing. How about you? What do you feel about the repetition? Later on, we will use this in our demo. Avoiding tangents. Tangents in our drawing is what we need to consider when we are creating a character. Tangents is a line touching but not intersecting another line. Here are the bad examples of tangents and good examples avoiding the tangents. See and observe the pictures shown on screen. We need to mind the tangents, especially when the character has clothes or hair. Be realistic in making a drawing. The wrong tangents do not exist in reality. There's no edgy down there. So, you need to think that there is a dimension in your character. Do not connect the tangents to the unconnected parts of your subject. Using asymmetrical drawing. Asymmetrical drawing portrays a feeling of movement and it draws attention. It automatically guides the audience to the focal point, and the gaze settles on the most critical aspect of the drawing. When creating a drawing, we don't need to have perfect piece by doing the left side, copy, and flip to complete it. If you did this in some of your works, I hope that you will stop doing it after watching this. Especially in real life, most people have a symmetrical face, so the drawing does too. Don't stress too much making a perfect asymmetrical face. Instead, make an asymmetrical face, then flip the canvas to check if the drawing is still in proportion. When creating a drawing, flip the canvas time to time to see if your construction is still okay. It is time consuming if you're not aware of what you're creating. It's good to flip it every time you feel satisfied to the unflipped one. After doing the rough sketches, the next process is the base color. When doing the base colors, we do it in each layers. Since we want to be careful if we'll color the wrong layer, do not merge all at once if you're not still satisfied or feeling done with all the details. After putting all the base colors, do not put the shadows and light immediately. It will make a distraction if you don't feel like it when it's done, especially if you have clients who prefers you to have the layered file right. You need to have a management in your drawing process, so you know what will be the next step. In my process, I do the base colors first, then shadows, and my final render in the lighting. When creating values into the subject, mainly in humans or animals or creature, you should not forget about the blushes in your subject. It gives more life to the character. See the difference of before and after. I love the blemish more. Well, it depends on you too. So how do I do this? First, I will get the red-orange color, and then I'll create a new layer and change the mode layer into multiply. Once you have the layer, you can start coloring the cheeks, nose, chin, ears, hands, knees, and feet. Sometimes I choose pinkish color, create a new layer underneath the multiple layer, starting coloring it on the cheeks. Well, it still depends on you. If you want the normal blemish, go with the multiply, or if you want more pinkish, then go with the overlay. Well, you can use both of it. So, here's how I use Liquify tool. If I'm not satisfied with the gesture or the line of action, I will use the Liquify tool to push my gesture and my proportion more accurate and better. This is helpful that you don't even need to erase and redo the lines again. In Photoshop, the shortcut key to Liquify is Ctrl plus Shift plus X. I really love pushing and correcting my proportion using Liquify tool. Here is another one, which is Warp. Warp is also a good tool when your angle isn't right. For Photoshop, I use L, lasso tool, to target the area. Ctrl T to transform, and then right click and choose Wrap. This will help you to correct the perspective of your drawing. Finally, we are now done with the lessons and techniques in creating an illustration. Now we are going to create our own original drawing by using what we learned in the lessons. Imagine that you are a commissioner asking yourself what will be your short story. If you still remember that we have Austin the cowboy, since I have the sample earlier, this is gonna be my demo. First is to create a short story of your character. Once you have the description, I'll be gathering for the references or ideas. You don't need a lot of references, just pick the best ones. Once I have the short description and references, I will start doing the basics, which is the gestures or line of action. Next step is the story. Knowing if the cowboy is connected to the environment, I'll be doing that later on. Since I got this short description, I need to match his personality with his pose. Next step is exaggeration. Here, I will liquefy the subject since I am not satisfied with the first rough sketch. This will help me to find the perfect exaggeration for my illustration. Next step is silhouette. Here, we will know if our character is readable. Also, pay attention to the negative spaces. Next step is the background. Since he is a handsome, pretty boy in town, I can draw crowded villagers at the back or perhaps a cowboy scenery. Next step is composition. I need to make sure that there is no empty grids in the artboard, or else I need to fix it by adding something. Next step is rhythm, making sure that there is small, large, or medium in the drawing, or else it will look generic. Next step is repetition, since repetition gives us unique symbol to our character. I will create some repetition even at the back. Don't forget to flip the canvas every time you are satisfied. Now we are all finished with the rough sketches. We must have different variations of the cowboy. Do not stay with your first draft to develop your skill in illustration. You must create a lot of variations to know where is your limit in a way. Maybe the second draft or third draft is better than your first draft. But if not, then that's okay, at least you tried. If you have the final draft, we can now proceed in the next step, which is the values, by putting basic colors in our illustration. Here, I will also do some color variations that I feel perfect. I need my reference to guide me for the lighting. It will help me to finish my artwork faster rather than guessing where the light bounces. Once you keep having references with you, in the future you will know where the light is coming from, since you are using your observation skills and telling, "Oh, I see, so this is where the light bounces. Awesome." Yeah, that's right. So once I pick the perfect color for my illustration, I will start doing my basic colors in my final rough sketch. I can also improve the color I chose. If we feel that is better than our previous color, then use it. You are free to explore even you are starting your color process, so don't hesitate to change anything in your art piece. Since I have my full basic colors, I can start dealing my piece by doing the dark shadows, creating a new layer and setting some multiply. If I'm satisfied with the dark shadows, I can start detailing with the lighting. If you feel that you are getting bored putting dark shadows, or maybe you feel that you don't know what is the next step, you can start putting the lighting on your drawing, as long as you know the direction of the light. Using screen layer, or you can choose color dash as your light. Of course, screen is better for me. Since we have the dark and light shadows, we can start detailing by doing some tiny details, but still it is visible when you are looking from afar. Again, be mindful about the details. Keep the detail loose by creating on a small size artboard, just like this. If I feel that I'm almost done with my illustration, I will get my texture paper to check if it is already great. Now, I will group all the layers and create a clipping mask into the cowboy folder. Applying the curves, color balance, brightness, and contrast is one of my favorite part of the process too. If I feel like that the lighting is more into yellow, I will go with the orangey or yellowish color balance. But it is really depends on the palette I got. And now we're done doing the illustration. If I'm done with the illustration, I will start merging all layers, duplicate my illustration, and then put the filter of the noise and sharpen it. Or perhaps blur in the background. After doing the illustration, I always check the quality on my phone. It's because phone changes the tones of my illustration, so I really need to be aware of it. Especially if I have clients, I should recheck it before sending it to them. So here is the final demo in our session, and I hope you learned something about it.